"Mom, you're too old to travel. Just stay home, please." Those words hung in my kitchen like a bad smell. My son Peter stood there, not angry or shouting, just looking at me with that mix of concern and condescension that adult children perfect when they decide their parents can no longer make sound decisions. He held my passport in his hand like it was something dangerous I shouldn't be trusted with. I couldn't speak. What was there to say? I'd spent the last decade of my life revolving around his family's needs, babysitting his 3 boys whenever called, bringing groceries unasked, folding laundry that wasn't mine, cooking meals for birthdays and bad days and every day in between. I'd canceled my own plans, turned down friendships, even walked away from a potential relationship with my book club friend Thomas, all to remain available whenever Peter and Catherine needed a safety net. And now, after 3 years of quietly saving, of researching Mediterranean cruises late at night when no one needed me, of finally taking steps towards something just for myself, Peter was standing in my kitchen telling me I was too old to dream, too old to explore, too old to exist outside the narrow role they'd assigned me. I watched him slide my passport into his jacket pocket like it was nothing, just something to be confiscated for my own protection. The kitchen suddenly felt colder, smaller. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder in the silence between us. But even louder was the silence inside me. That stunned, hollow feeling that comes when someone who claims to love you shows they don't see you at all. "You understand, right?" Peter added, his voice gentle, as if that made it better. "What if something happened to you over there? Who would help you?" He didn't wait for an answer. He didn't notice my expression. He just gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, the kind you give a child or a pet, and walked out, my passport and my autonomy tucked safely away where I couldn't misuse them. I stood frozen long after the front door closed, my hand still resting on the kitchen counter where my travel folder had been. There's something uniquely humiliating about being told you can't do something because of your age, especially when it comes from your own child. It's not just a no, it's a judgment. A reminder that somewhere along the way they stopped seeing you as a complete person. You become furniture, useful when needed, ignored when not, and never consulted about where you'd like to be placed. In that quiet kitchen, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not even defiance, something calmer but sharper, like a string that had been pulled too tight for too long finally snapping. I walked to the drawer where I kept important papers, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to an email from the cruise company. Booking confirmed. Mediterranean Explorer. Cabin 219. Departure May 30th. I smiled slightly. Not a happy smile, but the kind that comes when someone underestimates you so completely it becomes almost funny. Then I opened the folder Peter hadn't thought to look for. He believed taking my passport would be enough to stop me, but I'd made copies of all my documents weeks ago. I had everything scanned, backed up and printed because despite what my family seemed to think, I wasn't helpless. I never had been. That night, after making dinner that no one was coming to eat, I sat at my small desk and wrote a new will. Nothing dramatic, nothing vengeful, just clear and deliberate. My money, my house, my intentions laid out with precision. Not out of bitterness, but from a place of calm recognition. I needed to know that when I left this world, what remained would reflect what I truly valued. Freedom, respect, and the right to make my own choices until the very end. When I finished, I slid the papers into an envelope. The cruise was booked. My documents were ready. I just needed to wait. And Peter had no idea that the woman he called too old was about to reclaim everything they had quietly taken from her over the years, including her dignity. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop explaining herself and start living on her own terms. Tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys. My name is Maggie Wilson. I'm 62 years old, and until today, I would have told you without hesitation that my life's purpose was my family. I never had an impressive career or exotic adventures. My worth came from being reliable. My accomplishments were measured in birthday cakes baked, skinned knees bandaged, and warm meals delivered precisely when needed. When my husband Carl died 10 years ago, Peter became my anchor. He had just started at his law firm, and Catherine had just discovered she was pregnant with their first child. They were overwhelmed, afraid, unprepared. I stepped in without being asked. That's what mothers do, isn't it? I sold the house Carl and I had dreamed of retiring in, the one with the garden he'd planned to expand and the sunroom where I'd imagined reading through peaceful afternoons. I bought a smaller condo 15 minutes from Peter's house. I drove his boys to school every morning while Catherine worked from home. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week. I became the invisible support beam holding up their ceiling while they built their lives. When Catherine had their 3rd boy, I stayed with them for 8 straight months. I slept on their couch with a throw blanket that was too short. I folded endless piles of laundry at midnight. I rocked their colicky baby while they caught precious hours of sleep. I told myself I was fortunate. Not every mother gets to be so involved with her grandchildren. Not every woman finds renewed purpose after losing her husband. There were countless small moments I treasured. My youngest grandson, Sam, always asking specifically for grandma's eggs, because I sprinkled a little cinnamon in the scramble. Catherine complimenting the herbs in my garden boxes. Peter texting me, "You're our rock, Mom." After a particularly rough week, I saved those messages in a special folder on my phone. I told my friends at church, "He still needs me." I reminded myself, I'm still useful. Because when you're past 60 and the world keeps whispering that your worth decreases with each birthday, any reminder that you still matter feels precious. I didn't notice the shift right away. How could I? It came slowly like fog rolling in from the coast. One weekend, Peter didn't ask if I wanted to join them at the community pool. Another time, Catherine forgot to tell me about Sam's preschool spring concert. Small things, a missed call returned a day late, a dinner invitation that became "we already ate, but you can join us for dessert," an empty chair at Sam's t-ball game that I would have filled had I known. I brushed it all aside. People get busy. Life moves fast. I told myself not to be sensitive. But deep down I felt it happening, the fade, the gradual slide from being essential to being convenient. Still I smiled. Still, I showed up because I remembered how it used to be. The family dinners where we'd play board games until the boys fell asleep at the table. Peter falling asleep on the couch with the baby on his chest, trusting me to watch over them both. Catherine asking for my opinion on everything from wall colors to pediatricians. They made me feel like I belonged, not just as an extension of Peter, but as Maggie, a person with thoughts and feelings that mattered. I lived in those memories, held them close even as reality shifted. There was a time when Peter called me every day just to check in. That became once a week, then occasional texts. Eventually, I was the one initiating most contact. Sometimes my messages went unanswered for days. Still, I told myself this was normal, that the spotlight naturally shifts to the younger generation, that I should be content watching from the wings instead of expecting a place center stage. I didn't complain. I kept appearing with small gifts for the boys, extra groceries when I noticed their refrigerator looking bare, and hugs that lasted a bit too long because I needed to feel connected. But looking back, I see how easily I mistook routine for love and silence for peace. What I had wasn't peace. It was a cage disguised as harmony. And the saddest part? I was so grateful to be included at all that I forgot to include myself in my own dreams. I used to want to travel Italy, Spain, Morocco. Carl and I had made a list, taped it to our refrigerator with magnets shaped like landmarks from places we'd never been. When he died, I carefully folded that list and tucked it into a drawer. I told myself, maybe someday, then someday became some year. And eventually, it became someone else's decision entirely. Until Peter spoke those words that finally woke me up. "You're too old to travel." And everything I had pushed down came rushing to the surface. The first moment I truly noticed the change was during a Sunday dinner at my condo. It was our tradition, every other weekend, Peter's family would come to my place. I'd spend the day preparing, making Peter's favorite lemon rosemary chicken, setting the table with the good plates, making sure everything was perfect. They often arrived late or left early, but I still looked forward to these dinners. They gave me purpose, a reason to clean the guest bathroom and buy fresh flowers that someone besides me would see. That particular Sunday, after we'd finished eating and were having dessert, I gathered my courage and brought up something I'd been quietly researching for months. So, I began trying to sound casual despite my fluttering heart. I found this Mediterranean cruise. 10 days, leaves from Barcelona, stops in Italy, Greece, Croatia. I'm thinking about booking it. I said it like a confession, like I needed their blessing. Foolish, I know. I wasn't asking them to pay. I wasn't even asking them to join me. I just wanted to share something that had sparked joy in me, something that made me feel alive again. Peter glanced up from his phone briefly. Catherine continued spooning ice cream into Sam's bowl. A cruise, Peter repeated. I nodded, warming to the topic. Yes, I've been saving up. It's something your father and I always wanted to do. He leaned back, chuckling. What would you even do on a cruise, Mom? Play shuffleboard and hope you don't fall overboard. Catherine snorted. And don't forget the seasickness. Plus you always complain about buffet food. I tried to laugh along to brush off their dismissal. Actually, I thought I might take a cooking class. There's one on board that teaches Mediterranean dishes. And I've always wanted to see those blue domes in Santorini. Catherine raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of walking, Maggie. Are you sure you want to do all that alone? I straightened slightly. Yes, I do. Peter shook his head, still smiling like I'd said something adorable. You've been watching too many travel shows, Mom. Come on. You'd hate the crowds. And what if something happened? Who would help you? That was the moment. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it, like I was a child announcing I wanted to be an astronaut. Humor but not taken seriously. Like I didn't know my own mind. Like I hadn't raised him through heartbreak and hospital bills. Like I hadn't survived losing Carl and managed an entire household while grieving. Suddenly I wasn't his mother. I was a fragile old lady with unrealistic dreams. Someone to pat on the head and redirect to safer pastimes. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He wasn't being cruel. In his mind he was being practical, maybe even protective. But that didn't lessen the sting. And I realized with perfect clarity that somewhere along the way, Peter had stopped seeing me. He saw my gray hair, my reading glasses, the arthritis in my hands. He saw the woman who helped with the kids and kept his pantry stocked. But he didn't see me, the woman who once danced barefoot with his father in summer rain, who read poetry by candlelight, who still dreamed of drinking wine on a terrace in Florence. I swallowed the ache in my throat, changed the subject, and laughed when they made another joke at my expense. But that night, alone in my bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. It was just one conversation, just a few dismissive words. But something inside me cracked that night, a hairline fracture that would only grow wider with time. I tried to convince myself it wasn't important. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was reaching too high for my age and circumstances. But deep down I knew that if I didn't fight for this one dream, this one piece of myself, I might disappear completely. And the woman I used to be, the one still living quietly inside me, deserved her chance to emerge again. That dinner conversation was the first clear warning sign. And once you notice one, you begin to see all the others that were there all along. That Sunday dinner was just the beginning. After Peter and Catherine dismissed my cruise plans, I expected something to change. Not an apology necessarily, but maybe a follow-up question. Perhaps a text saying, "Hey, tell me more about that trip you mentioned." Something to show they had at least registered my dream as real. Instead, they acted like I'd never mentioned it at all. The cruise, like so many other parts of me, simply vanished from their awareness. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, being too sensitive, reading too much into silence. But the silence wasn't new. It had been growing for years. I just hadn't wanted to hear it. The week after the dinner, I brought over groceries as I always did. I'd noticed their refrigerator looking empty during Sunday's visit, so I stopped by the Good Market across town. The one with the fresh bread Peter loves and the organic produce Catherine prefers. I bought ingredients for 3 meals, plus snacks for the boys' lunches. I even picked up those special juice boxes Sam likes, the ones without added sugar. When I arrived, Catherine was at the kitchen counter, headphones in, talking animatedly on a work call. She barely glanced up when I came in, just gave a distracted half-wave without pausing her conversation. I unloaded the bags quietly, organizing items in the pantry and refrigerator the way she likes. She didn't ask what I'd brought, didn't offer a thank you. When I finished, I kissed Sam's forehead where he played in the living room and slipped out without Catherine even noticing I was leaving. It was a small thing. People get busy. But it wasn't just one time. 3 days later, I had a doctor's appointment. Just a routine checkup. But I'd been feeling dizzy after standing up too quickly. The doctor had advised me not to drive myself, just as a precaution. I texted Peter asking if he might be free to take me. His reply came 2 hours later. Can't. Swamped at work. Maybe Uber. Uber. I read that message several times like the words might rearrange themselves into something less dismissive. Just 3 months earlier, Peter had driven me 3 hours round trip to a cardiology consultation that turned out to be nothing. He'd insisted on taking the whole day off work, saying, "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Of course I'm driving you." Now I was a problem to be solved with an app. A burden to be outsourced. I didn't respond to his text. There didn't seem to be any point. The following week brought another small cut. I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw Catherine had posted photos from Sam's preschool art show. Dozens of pictures, the children proudly displaying paintings, Peter kneeling next to displays, Catherine's sister posing with the boys. I wasn't in any of them. Not because I didn't attend. I wasn't invited. I didn't even know it had happened. I stared at those photos for a long time. Not because I felt left out of a social event, but because it finally hit me that they didn't think I mattered enough to include. Not anymore. I used to be their first call for everything: dinners, emergencies, advice on rashes and fevers, and how to get grape juice out of white shirts. Now I was their backup plan, their afterthought. I'd been demoted from essential to available. The worst part was how casual it all felt to them. Like this was the natural order of things. Like I should have expected to become peripheral the moment I crossed into my 60s. And maybe that's the hardest thing to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. Aging isn't just about stiff joints or reading glasses. Sometimes it's about the way people stop listening when you speak. How they look past you instead of at you. How they start calling your dreams cute and your suggestions old-fashioned. It chips away at you in almost imperceptible increments. Catherine began correcting me more often. How I held the baby. How I made oatmeal. How I folded towels. The same way I'd been folding them for 40 years. Peter started saying, "Don't worry, Mom. We've got it covered." Before I even offered help. I tried to adapt. I tried to shake it off, but inside I felt myself shrinking. I could feel myself pulling inward like a turtle retreating into its shell. One Wednesday afternoon, I stopped by to drop off a casserole. I let myself in with my key. Something I'd always done. From the kitchen, I heard Catherine on the phone in the living room. She was laughing, talking to someone about weekend plans. "No, it's just family this Saturday," she was saying. "Well, Peter's mother might come by. She usually does." I froze with the casserole dish still in my hands. Peter's mother. Not Maggie. Not even my mother-in-law. Just Peter's mother. Like I was a footnote in their family story. I set the dish down silently and was about to leave when I heard more. "My in-laws are basically retired from reality," Catherine continued with a laugh. "Maggie means well, but she's stuck in the past. Everything's a story. Everything's a memory." I stood motionless, feeling the words land like small stones against my skin. She wasn't being deliberately cruel. She probably didn't even think I could hear her. But her casual dismissal confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. In their eyes, I was fading away. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd stayed too long, given too much love too quietly. The truth is, when you raise a family, you pour everything into them. Your energy, your time, your very identity. But if you're not careful, you look up one day and realize you've given so much away that there's nothing left for you. And they don't give it back. They don't even notice it's missing. That's what emotional erosion feels like. It's not one dramatic betrayal. It's 100 small omissions, 1,000 tiny dismissals. It's the seat that no one saves for you, the opinion no one asks for, the call that never comes. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you begin to wonder if you ever truly belonged at all. The culmination came at Catherine's birthday. I had spent the entire week planning something special. Not because she asked, but because I wanted to feel useful again. I wanted to remind myself that I could still bring joy to someone I cared about. I'd raised Peter to appreciate gestures of love. I always believed that small acts of care, homemade food, handwritten notes, thoughtfully chosen gifts, still mattered, even if the world had moved on to gift cards and text messages. So I made Catherine's favorite dessert, lemon lavender cake with honey buttercream frosting. I hadn't made it in years, not since Carl's last birthday, but I remembered Catherine once saying it was the only cake I'd actually eat the whole slice of. I decorated it myself, pressing edible flowers along the sides, piping delicate swirls across the top. I even bought a special cake carrier so it would arrive perfect. Along with it, I selected a bottle of the rose she'd mentioned liking at a restaurant months ago. I tied a small handwritten note to it with baker's twine. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying the cake in one hand and the wine in the other. Their living room was already filled with guests, neighbors, co-workers, friends I didn't recognize. Peter greeted me with a quick side hug, barely glancing at what I'd brought. "Just set it in the kitchen," he said, already turning away to refill someone's drink. I smiled, carried the cake carefully to the counter, and placed it next to store-bought cupcakes and a cheese platter. I took a deep breath, straightened the tag on the wine bottle, and made my way back toward the living room. That's when I heard it. "She still tries so hard. Isn't it adorable?" Catherine's voice, clear despite the party noise. She was talking to two women, all holding glasses of wine. One of them glanced toward the kitchen and snickered. "She's like one of those sweet old ladies in Hallmark movies," Catherine continued. "Always baking or knitting or giving advice nobody asked for." The others laughed and I stood frozen, one hand still resting on the back of a dining chair as if I needed it to remain upright. They didn't know I was there, just a few steps behind them, partially hidden by a tall lamp. Close enough to smell Catherine's perfume. Close enough to feel every word hit like a physical blow. "She still tries so hard." The phrase echoed in my head, transforming me from a person into a quaint anachronism, someone to be tolerated with bemused affection, the way you might humor a child showing you a mediocre drawing. I stepped back silently, slipped into the hallway bathroom, and shut the door. Inside, I didn't cry right away. I just stood at the sink, staring at my reflection under the harsh bathroom lights. My makeup looked nice. My hair was styled the way Catherine had once complimented. I'd even worn the earrings Peter gave me 2 Christmases ago. All of it, every small detail, had been chosen to show them I still mattered, that I was still connected to them. But they didn't see any of it. They only saw effort. Effort they didn't need. Effort that apparently embarrassed them. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not dramatically, not loudly. Something small, silent, but irreparable. I washed my hands slowly, breathing carefully, willing myself not to shake. Then I walked back out, smiled at strangers, nodded politely when someone complimented the cake without knowing I'd made it, and stood in the corner like a polite guest at an event where I knew no one. Not once did Catherine introduce me to her friends. Not once did Peter check if I needed anything or was comfortable. Later, when the cake was being cut and someone asked where it came from, Catherine simply shrugged and said, "I think my mother-in-law brought it." My mother-in-law. Like I was a line in the program, an obligatory mention, a footnote to the evening. I waited for someone to use my name, to look at me like I belonged there, but no one did. When I finally left, I did it without fanfare. I hugged the boys, told Peter thank you for having me, and didn't wait for a response. Catherine barely looked up from her conversation. She just lifted her glass slightly in my direction, the way you might acknowledge a server clearing a plate. The walk to my car felt endless. This wasn't the sharp sting of an insult or the clear pain of rejection. It was worse, the slow seepage of insignificance. The kind of hurt that gets under your skin without anyone noticing. The kind that makes you question your own worth because no one else seems to value it anymore. That was the night I stopped giving pieces of myself away. Not out of anger, but out of simple self-preservation. Because I finally realized I was running out of pieces to give. After Catherine's birthday party, I waited. I didn't call or text immediately. I waited for someone, Peter, Catherine, anyone, to reach out. To acknowledge the shift, to sense the silence I was now carrying like a weight across my chest. But nothing came. The days passed quietly. I still picked up Sam from daycare twice that week. I still noticed their empty refrigerator and stocked it without being asked. I still folded laundry when I saw the basket overflowing by the stairs. I moved through their house like a ghost with keys. Helpful, efficient, invisible. But inside me, something fundamental had changed. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't plotting some dramatic confrontation. I was simply done. Done trying to matter to people who couldn't see me. Done pretending that being needed was the same as being loved. The following Sunday brought another family dinner. Peter texted me mid-morning. "Can you make spaghetti tonight? Catherine's not feeling great." No greeting, no please, just an expectation. as if I were an appliance that could be switched on with the press of a button. I made the spaghetti. Of course I did. But this time I didn't set their table with the nice napkins. I didn't bring extra garlic bread or make a salad or light the candles like I usually would. I just prepared the food, drove it to their house, and placed it on the stove. No one properly greeted me when I arrived. Catherine stayed on the couch scrolling through her phone, half watching a reality show. Peter came home late, tossed his keys on the counter, kissed her forehead and asked, "Is dinner ready?" Not, "Did Mom make it?" Or, "Is Mom here?" I watched him serve himself, watched Catherine pick at her plate. Not once did either of them look up and say thank you. Not once did anyone ask how my day had been or if I'd eaten yet myself. I didn't join them at the table. I stood in the kitchen, sipping a glass of water, listening to them discuss weekend plans like I wasn't even in the room. And that's when it happened. A moment so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking right at it. Sam ran into the kitchen clutching a piece of construction paper. "Grandma, look. I drew a dinosaur." I knelt down to his level, genuinely smiling for the first time that day. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. What's his name?" Before Sam could answer, Catherine called from the living room. "Sam, come show Daddy. Grandma's busy right now." He hesitated just for a second, confusion crossing his little face. Then he turned and ran to his father. That hesitation, that brief moment of uncertainty in his eyes, was when I finally understood what was happening. I wasn't being pushed away with cruelty. I was being erased with politeness, replaced by convenience, quietly phased out by a family that no longer needed what I offered, but didn't know how to say so. So I decided to do what they couldn't. That night, while they were still eating dessert, I slipped away. No announcement, no goodbye. I walked down their hallway, took my coat from the closet, and stepped outside into the cool evening air. I didn't drive straight home after leaving Peter and Catherine's house that night. Instead, I parked by the small lake 2 blocks from their neighborhood. I rolled down my window despite the evening chill and just sat there. The sky was turning from deep blue to black, a few stars appearing like distant witnesses. I waited for tears, for anger, for the crushing weight of rejection to engulf me. None of that came. What I felt instead was oddly light, almost floating, like something heavy I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't straining to hold together relationships that were quietly coming undone. I wasn't performing love for people who had forgotten what it looked like when it wasn't attached to usefulness. I started my car and drove home with the radio off, listening to the soft hum of tires against pavement. When I arrived at my condo, I didn't turn on all the lights like I usually did. I didn't check my phone for messages. I simply went to my bedroom closet and pulled out a small suitcase. The one I bought years ago for a weekend trip with Carl that we never got to take because he got sick. I packed methodically, just enough clothes for a few days. Nothing fancy, just necessities. Then I went to my computer and found a rental listing I bookmarked months ago during a late-night bout of restlessness. A small apartment near the harbor, available for short-term stays. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with a view of the water. I booked it without overthinking, putting the charge on my rarely used credit card. Before leaving the next morning, I wrote a brief note and left it magnetized to my refrigerator. "Going away for a bit. Don't worry, I'm safe. Mom." That was it. I turned off my phone, locked my door, and drove away. I didn't answer the 3 missed calls that appeared when I briefly checked my phone 2 days later. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. And what surprised me most wasn't how liberating it felt. It was how long I had been holding my breath, waiting for someone to notice I wasn't breathing. Now, for the first time in years, I finally was. The harbor apartment was small and plain. 1 bedroom with faded yellow curtains, a worn floral couch that had seen better days, a chipped blue kettle that whistled like it was tired of being useful. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, chosen by me. The lease was for just 2 weeks. And the silence was heavy. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I didn't feel like explaining. I needed air, space, stillness, a place where no one would ask me to babysit or fold towels or bring a casserole. I wanted to exist for myself, even if I didn't yet know who that self was anymore. The first morning there, I made tea and sat by the window facing the harbor. Boats drifted in and out like they had nowhere particular to be. The water sparkled under the morning sun like someone had scattered diamonds across its surface. And for a moment I felt calm. But by the third night, the silence started to feel like a physical weight pressing on my chest. I woke at 3:17 a.m. sweating, heart racing. I reached for my phone out of habit, before remembering I had turned it off. No new messages, no missed calls, no one looking for me. That was the moment it truly hit me. No one had noticed I was gone. Not Peter, not Catherine, not even a polite, "Where are you?" text from one of the boys. And I told myself it was fine. I had wanted this, hadn't I? Freedom, distance, independence. But at 3:17 a.m., that kind of freedom feels a lot like being forgotten. I made myself get up, shuffled to the small kitchenette, and made toast just to have something to do. I sat on the couch with the plate in my lap, staring at the wall, chewing slowly. The toast tasted like nothing, dry and ashen in my mouth. I looked around the dim room and thought, is this it? Is this how I finish? Not in a blaze of dignity and color, but in a rented apartment surrounded by furniture that doesn't know my name. I missed the chaos of children, even their piercing shouts. I missed the creaky third stair at Peter's house. I missed the sound of the backyard gate clicking shut. I missed someone saying my name like it belonged to a person who mattered. I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was frizzing at the roots. My skin looked dull in the unflattering light. My eyes were puffy from sleep or perhaps from not enough of it. I didn't look like me. I didn't know who me was anymore. Was I still the woman who used to bake 3-tier birthday cakes from scratch? Who wrote love letters to Carl in cursive on linen paper? Who wore red lipstick just to go to the post office? Or was I just someone's mother? Someone's grandmother? A placeholder between carpool pickups and leftover spaghetti? I looked around that small cold bathroom and realized I had built my entire identity around other people's needs. I had watered everyone else's garden for so long that mine had turned to dust. I sank to the floor, back against the bathtub, and cried harder than I had since Carl died. The kind of crying you don't plan, raw, ugly, purging. I cried for Carl, for the life we were supposed to have, for the cruise we never took, for the years I gave away without asking for anything in return, for every time I smiled when I wanted to scream, for every dinner I cooked that nobody thanked me for every time Peter called me Mom, like it was a job title instead of a name. I cried until my body ached from it, and when it finally stopped I felt hollow. That was rock bottom. Not because I had lost something, but because I had finally realized how little I'd been holding on to. No one had pushed me down there. I had walked myself into it inch by inch, year by year, believing I was doing the right thing, believing love and sacrifice were the same thing, believing that shrinking myself made me stronger somehow. But on that bathroom floor, I realized something no one had ever told me. You can disappear even while being needed. You can be essential and still invisible. And unless you choose to rise, no one's coming to rescue you. After that night on the bathroom floor, something inside me went quiet. Not in a numbing way, but in the way a storm finally settles. I didn't have answers and I didn't feel particularly strong, but I'd cried out everything that had been tangled inside me. All the guilt, all the confusion, all the stories I told myself about being a good mother, a helpful woman, a humble presence. I woke up the next morning feeling empty but strangely clear. I made coffee. I folded the same sweater twice because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. And then I pulled out the last box I had brought from home. It was labeled Carl's old stuff. I hadn't opened it since I moved into my condo. Carl had been gone for over 10 years, but I still hadn't gone through everything he left behind. There was always a reason to put it off. Too busy, too tired, too afraid of what emotions it might stir up. But now, with no one asking for dinner or babysitting or errands, I had nothing but time. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened the box. The smell hit me first. Dust and paper and something faintly warm like cedar. Inside were a few of his worn ties, his old leather wallet, and a stack of travel brochures we'd collected when we were still dreaming of retirement. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Santorini, Florence, Dubrovnik, Lisbon. I flipped through them slowly, seeing his tiny notes in the margins. Boat tour here. Maggie would love this view. Save for this one. And then at the very bottom, tucked beneath a manila envelope, I found a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges and creased like it had been opened and refolded many times. I unfolded it carefully. It was a letter in Carl's handwriting addressed to me. For when you're ready, it said at the top. I blinked, my hand trembling slightly. I began to read. Maggie, if you're reading this, it probably means I'm not around anymore. And I'm sorry for the pain. For leaving you to carry all the weight we were meant to share. That I know you. You've always been the strong one. The one who made holidays beautiful. Who showed up even when she was breaking inside. I know that after I'm gone, you'll put everyone else first again and again because that's who you are. But I need you to do one thing for me now. Don't disappear. Don't let them turn you into a ghost in your own life. You've given so much to everyone. Peter, the kids, even me. But there's still a woman inside you who once danced barefoot to Fleetwood Mac in the kitchen. The woman who wanted to see the world, taste wine in Italy, ride a train through the Alps, and swim in the Adriatic Sea. She's still in there, Maggie. And she deserves to live. So I planned something. Before my last surgery, I booked a cruise for your 60th birthday. It was meant to be a surprise. I wanted to show you that your dreams mattered too. That it wasn't too late. I didn't get to take you and I'm sorry for that. But the cruise credit is still there. Paid in full. Voucher numbers on the back of this letter. I made sure you could use it whenever you were ready. You don't need anyone's permission. Not Peter's, not anyone's. You're not too old. You're not too late. You're just waiting to remember who you are. So go. And when you stand at the edge of the ocean, close your eyes and let the wind remind you that you're still here. Still you. And you always were enough. Carl. I sat there with the letter pressed to my chest, rocking slightly as if holding it tight would bring him back. The tears came again, but these were different. These weren't grief tears. They were recognition. Carl had seen me. Even in the moments I forgot who I was, he remembered. And he left this for me. Not just the voucher but the reminder, the permission. I pulled out my laptop, typed in the voucher code with shaking fingers. It worked. Every detail was still there. 10-day Mediterranean cruise. Balcony room. Departure in 4 weeks. I covered my mouth and laughed. A real laugh, rusty from disuse. It wasn't just a booking. It was a doorway, a key to the life I'd placed on hold for too long. A message from the only person who had ever truly understood what I gave up to keep others whole. And now it was time to make myself whole. Everything looked the same, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't know what to call it at first. It wasn't confidence, not exactly. It was quieter than that, more like remembering. Remembering that I had once had a name that wasn't just Mom or Grandma. That before I was someone's helper, I was someone's dreamer, someone's partner, someone with her own stories. Carl saw it even when I forgot. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how long it had been since anyone truly saw me. Not as an extension of their needs but as a person with her own wants, her own voice. I walked back to the apartment that day and pulled open the closet. The cruise was in 3 weeks. I opened my suitcase and stood there for a full minute, unsure what to do next. Then I started sorting. Not the way I usually packed for family trips: extra snacks, emergency medications, toys for the kids, backup jackets for someone else. This time it was just for me. I held up a dress I hadn't worn in years. A deep teal linen dress Carl used to love. Makes your eyes look like the ocean, he once said. I had almost donated it when I moved, thinking, where would I ever wear this again? Now I placed it gently into the suitcase. Piece by piece I began filling it. My favorite blouse, a sun hat I bought on impulse 5 years ago and never wore. A pair of silver earrings I tucked away for special occasions that never came. Every item felt like a little yes to myself. I started researching the cruise's destinations. I watched videos of Santorini, its whitewashed buildings perched on cliffs like whispers against the sky. I read about the food in Dubrovnik, the markets in Palermo, the turquoise waters in Corfu. I made a list not of what I should do but of what I wanted to try. Then I started walking again. Every morning, just a few blocks along the harbor. Not for exercise, not to check a box, just to feel my legs move, to breathe, to listen to the sound of the water lapping against the docks. I began to notice things during my morning harbor walks. How the light shifted at different times of day. How the gulls circled the same boats like clockwork. How the sea never stopped moving, and neither should I. I found myself humming in the mornings, making real meals again just for me. Music played in the background, sometimes jazz, sometimes Fleetwood Mac. One day, I passed a cafe with a flyer for a free watercolor class. I almost walked past it. Then I stopped. I hadn't painted since I was 24. That Thursday, I showed up with shaking hands and zero expectations. The teacher, a woman about my age with paint splatters on her jeans, smiled warmly. "There's no wrong way to begin," she said, handing me a brush. So I began. My first painting was clumsy and soft and looked nothing like the bowl of lemons I was trying to capture. But I didn't care. I laughed at the streaks of color at my crooked lines. It felt like waking up a part of myself that had been hibernating for decades. After class, I bought myself flowers. Not for a birthday, not because someone was coming over, just because they were beautiful and I wanted to see something blooming in my space. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at my reflection without judgment. Not to check for wrinkles, not to critique my hair, just to say, "There you are." Not just a mother, not just a helper. Maggie, still here, still breathing, still wanting. That was the awakening. Not a roar but a whisper, a gentle unfolding. Not a fire but a spark. It was the moment I stopped waiting for someone to notice me and decided to notice myself. And once that happens, there's no going back. Once I decided I was going, I didn't announce it. There were no dramatic phone calls, no letters to the family, no teary goodbyes, just quiet decisions made behind closed doors. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. I moved through the days with calm purpose, each task building upon the next, like laying stones across a river. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just building a bridge back to myself. Started with paperwork. I walked into the passport office with a copy of my original, my birth certificate, and a calm smile. The woman behind the counter looked at me skeptically. "Did you lose your old one?" she asked. "No," I said simply. "Someone else thought they needed it more than I did." She blinked but didn't press. I appreciated that. A few days later, I went to the bank and opened a separate account. Just my name, my money, no one else on the paperwork. I even changed my online passwords. All of them. For the first time, I felt what privacy really meant. Not hiding but protecting. Then I called my lawyer, Mr. Halbert, a gentleman in his 70s who had helped Carl set up our first will. I asked if he could help me revise mine. "Of course, Maggie," he said. "What are you thinking?" I told him I wanted clarity, no confusion, no loopholes. I wasn't writing anyone out of my life out of anger, but I needed the people in my life to know that love isn't a blank check. We spent 2 hours reviewing documents. I shifted funds into a scholarship for older women returning to school. I set aside a small travel fund for single mothers over 60 who had never left the country. And yes, I adjusted the family portion too. Fair but firm. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just drawing a line. Before I left his office, I handed him an envelope. "This is a sealed copy of the will. If anything happens or if anyone comes looking for it, you know what to do." He nodded with a look I can only describe as respect. The silence worked in my favor. Peter didn't call for 5 days, and when he finally did, it wasn't because he was worried. It was because he needed something. "Hey, Mom." His voice buzzed through my phone like static. "Too casual, too late. We were wondering if you could come over Thursday and watch the boys. Catherine's got a meeting and I'll be at the firm late." I almost laughed. The old me would have said yes before he even finished asking. I would have cleared my day, packed snacks, brought over little gifts to surprise the kids. I would have ironed my shirt, arrived early, and left late with dishes washed and laundry folded. But that woman no longer lived here. I stood by the window of my apartment, the harbor breeze brushing against my neck, and let a full 3 seconds pass before I answered. "I'll be out of town," I said. There was a pause, a beat too long. "Out of town," he repeated as if he had never heard me say those words before. "Yes," I said plainly. "I have plans." "Oh," he hesitated. "What kind of plans?" Another woman might have offered details, might have over-explained out of guilt or habit, but I had nothing to justify. "Personal ones," I replied. He was quiet again. I could practically hear him trying to recalibrate. "I mean, we just assumed." He started then trailed off. "Assumed I'd be available." I finished for him gently but clearly. He didn't respond and I didn't fill the space. I let it hang there, the weight of it, the truth of it. I let him sit with the reality that I had a life beyond his convenience. It was the day before my departure. I had my passport. My suitcase was packed. My itinerary was printed, folded neatly inside Carl's letter. I double-checked my travel documents, charged my phone, and left a copy of my new will with my lawyer. Everything was set, but something inside me felt unfinished. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I had spent so much of my life being silent, and I didn't want to leave that house, the place where I had sacrificed so much of myself without at least giving Peter a chance to see me, truly see me. Not as a convenience or a placeholder or the woman who showed up with meals and band-aids and birthday cards, but as a person who had finally stopped waiting. I didn't tell him I was coming. I just showed up. The house looked the same. The front steps still needed painting. The screen door creaked like it always had, but something about it felt smaller now, like the illusion had cracked, and I was seeing it all for what it was. A place I had poured my soul into while slowly vanishing in plain sight. Peter opened the door surprised. "Mom." He looked behind me as if expecting someone else to be standing there. "I thought you were, out of town." "I leave tomorrow," I said quietly. He stepped aside. I walked in slowly like I was visiting a place I once lived in a dream. The living room was cluttered with toys. Catherine's laptop was open on the dining table. The TV buzzed softly in the background. Everything exactly as I'd left it and yet completely different. "I just came to drop something off," I said. Peter looked confused but didn't speak. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope, the same one I had left on my apartment counter. I held it out to him. He didn't take it right away. "What is this?" he asked. "My truth," I replied. He blinked, thrown off by the calm in my voice. "Mom, is this about the babysitting thing? You didn't have to make it a big." "It's not about babysitting," I interrupted. "It's about being seen." He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't understand." "No," I said, "you don't. And that's why I'm here." I stepped closer. Not with anger but with clarity. "I gave everything I had to this family, Peter. My time, my energy, my life. I showed up when no one else did. I filled every gap so you could work late so Catherine could rest. So the kids had someone to call when they were scared or sick. And I never asked for much in return. Just kindness, respect, a little acknowledgement that I was still a person, not just a service." He opened his mouth to speak, but I kept going. "I tried to tell you I wanted to travel, that I still had dreams. You laughed. Catherine called me cute. You both looked right through me like I'd lost my mind." His eyes lowered. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," I said gently. "But you did. Not with cruelty but with disregard. And that's sometimes even harder to heal from." A long silence fell between us. Then I placed the envelope on the table. "I'm going on the cruise Carl booked for us years ago. He saved for it, planned it, left it for me because he saw me. Even in the end, he saw who I was beyond the titles. And I'm going because I refuse to leave this earth having only been useful to others." Peter looked up slowly, eyes wide with something like guilt, or maybe recognition. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I know you didn't," I said. "Now you do." He stepped forward slightly. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I tried," I said, "so many times. But I was always interrupted, laughed off, redirected, and I was too tired to push harder." I picked up my bag and turned toward the door. "You don't need to fix anything right now," I added. "I didn't come here for an apology. I just needed to speak, and now I have." He stood there, still holding the envelope, looking at me like he was finally starting to realize how much space I'd occupied in his life, and how quietly I had held it all together. At the door I turned once more and said, "You're a good man, Peter. I know that. But good men still need to learn how to see the women who raised them." Then I left, not in anger, not in sorrow, but with the peace that comes from saying what needed to be said. I boarded the cruise ship with a calm I hadn't known in years. As the massive vessel hummed beneath my feet, and the breeze tugged at my scarf, I stood on the deck and looked out at the sea, wide, open, endless. It didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a return to myself, to the woman I had been before I gave up pieces of her to everyone else. For the first few days, I let myself sink into the rhythm of the water. I explored the ship. I tried every breakfast pastry they offered. I listened to stranger stories, laughed with women I had just met in yoga class, and watched the sunrise each morning with a fresh cup of coffee and no one else to serve but myself. But the real moment of justice, the final twist, came on the fourth day while we were anchored near Santorini. I had just come back from a guided hike to my cheeks pink from the sun, my legs aching in that good satisfying way. As I entered my cabin, I found a message from the concierge slipped under my door. Please check with the guest services desk at your earliest convenience. A document has arrived for you. Confused, I headed downstairs. They handed me a large envelope express-mailed from home. No return address. I took it back to my room and opened it slowly. Inside were two things. First, a letter from my lawyer, Mr. Halbert. Maggie, I just wanted to confirm delivery of the updated will to your son. Per your instructions, the document was hand-delivered after you left. As expected, I received a call from Peter the following day. He had questions, lots of them, but I assured him that everything was legally airtight and signed. Your wishes were clear. He eventually understood. Just thought you'd want to know it was done. I exhaled, my heartbeat steady, not out of vindication but from relief. Then I pulled out the second document. It was a letter, not typed, handwritten, from Peter. Mom, I didn't understand. Not until I saw it in writing. Not until I realized you had gone ahead and taken yourself seriously when we didn't. I read every line of that will, and it hit me harder than anything you said at the house. Not because of the money, but because it made me realize how blind I've been. You gave us everything. You filled in every gap, every silence, every broken moment, and we made you feel like a placeholder. You were never supposed to have to prove your worth, but you did. And now I see it. I stopped reading, my eyes wet. I sat down at the small desk near the window and continued. Catherine and I have been talking, really talking, and she admitted something I didn't want to hear. That we treated your presence like a service, not a gift. That when you left, things fell apart. Not because we couldn't manage, but because the love behind everything you did was suddenly missing. Sam cries for you sometimes. And I didn't know how to explain where you were until I realized maybe you're exactly where you should be. Somewhere that doesn't ask you to disappear for others to feel comfortable. You were right about all of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I am asking for another chance to know you again. Not as mom or grandma or helper, but as Maggie, the woman who still wants to see the world. The last line made me cover my mouth with my hand. I hope the cruise is everything Dad dreamed it would be for you and more. We love you, even if we didn't show it when it mattered most. I closed the letter and placed it gently on the desk. It wasn't the kind of justice you could take to court. It wasn't loud or triumphant, but it was real, honest, personal. He hadn't changed overnight, but the silence had done what years of self-sacrifice never could. It had made them notice. It had made them listen, and that was justice. Not because I punished them, but because I stopped erasing myself to make them feel whole. Later that evening, I got dressed for dinner in the teal dress Carl loved. The one he said made my eyes look like the ocean. I added a pair of silver earrings and a splash of lipstick. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw her. Not the ghost, not the helper, me, Maggie, whole, present, finally seen. It had been almost 2 weeks since I returned from the cruise. The trip had changed me. Not in a grand cinematic way, but in quiet, irreversible ways. I was walking differently, not physically, emotionally. There was a weight that no longer sat on my shoulders. I no longer checked my phone out of obligation. I no longer looked to others for cues on what I was allowed to feel, say, or want. And then one afternoon there was a knock at my door. I opened it slowly, not expecting anyone. Peter stood there holding Sam's hand. He looked different. Tired, yes, but softer somehow, like life had humbled him a little. Hi, Mom, he said, eyes searching my face. Do you have a minute? I opened the door wider. They stepped inside quietly like guests instead of family, and I could feel how much had changed. My travel photos were fanned out on the counter like feathers. He bent down and whispered something to Sam, who shuffled forward and held out a folded piece of paper. I knelt to take it. It was a crayon drawing. Me on a boat, arms open wide, sun shining above. Underneath it said in big, uneven letters, Grandma, I missed you. My throat tightened as I pulled him into a hug. His small arms clung to my neck like nothing had changed. Like love was still intact no matter how messy the world around it became. Peter cleared his throat. I don't know what I expected, he began, voice unsure. Maybe that you'd come back and everything would go back to how it was. But then we read your will and your letter and the silence sense. It made me realize you're not just my mom. You're a person with your own life. I should have known that, but I didn't, and I'm sorry. I nodded, not with forgiveness, not yet, but with acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that, I said. I was hoping we could start again, he continued. Not with expectations, just conversations. I gestured for him to sit. We talked for an hour about nothing big, just little things. What the cruise was like, how Sam was doing in school, what books I was reading. He asked questions he'd never thought to ask before. And this time he actually listened. He didn't try to fix anything. He just showed up, and that was enough. When they left, Sam hugged me twice. Peter kissed my cheek and said, "You look happy." And but I wasn't dependent on that moment to prove it. That evening I made myself a simple dinner. Herbed pasta and roasted vegetables, and poured a glass of wine. I lit a candle, not because anyone was coming over, but because I liked the way the flicker made the walls glow. After I ate, I took a walk along the harbor. The water shimmered under the streetlights, and the breeze was warm against my skin. There were couples walking hand in hand, a woman reading on a bench, a man playing violin softly for no one in particular. I stopped at the railing and looked out at the water, remembering the sound of the waves hitting the side of the cruise ship, remembering Carl's letter, his voice in my head. Don't disappear. I didn't. I was here alive, free, whole. I didn't need Peter's approval. I didn't need Catherine's validation. I didn't need to be invited to dinner or asked to babysit to feel like I mattered. Because now I lived in a world of my own choosing. One where I wasn't measured by what I could offer, but honored for who I was. And in that moment, I understood something I had never truly grasped before. Sometimes the greatest love you can give your family is the example of your own freedom. Because maybe one day they'll remember the woman who stopped disappearing, the woman who boarded a ship and returned not just with souvenirs but with her whole self restored. I turned away from the water and walked home in peace. Not finished, just finally begun.